right, students. So chapter 14 is about us expanding westward, a manifest destiny concept. Some of this is going to go back and retrace some of the things we've already talked about. So I'm going to go a little bit fast on some of it because we have already discussed some of it. One of the things we haven't talked too much about is Oregon country. Lewis and Clark made it all the way west to Oregon, and once they did, enterprising people decided to follow them out there. So there's a lot of space between the Mississippi River, which was, sort of the boundary of civilization, and Oregon country, and then the Rocky Mountains were in the way. And the Oregon country itself was a large area. It was not just what we consider Oregon today. If you notice, it overlaps portions of modern day Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, all of that. It includes a large chunk of land, not just what we consider Oregon today. And we're not the only people who would like to be there. In fact, we don't own it. Let's face it. When they went to Oregon, they were on someone else's land. 4 nations claim this area. The United States bases their claim on Robert Gray's discovery of the Columbia River back in 1792 and Lewis and Clark's expedition. But honestly, they have a very weak claim because no one had been out there again until the 1800s, and the Spanish had been in that area, in the western area of the continent, for a long, long time. The United Kingdom, Britain, also claims it because they had explorations on the Columbia River as well, and they had been in Canada for a long time. Russia also claims it because they possess settlements south from Alaska into Oregon, and they had been there for quite some time. Spain claims it as well because they had been in Northern California for a long time, and honestly, in my humble opinion, they probably had the strongest claim, although they were probably one of the most least interested parties in the whole thing. Okay, now, one of the other things we have to deal with is the Adams-Onis Treaty, and we've talked about this in class before, so I'm going to go through this really fast. Remember, we had Spanish Florida, and in 1819, during the presidency of James Monroe, even before he himself was president, John Quincy Adams was Secretary of State, and they formed the Adams-Onis Treaty. And it's named after John Quincy Adams is Secretary of State, not as president. And so Spain gets the section, as you can see on the little red section, they get that part of Texas that's really good farmland, and we get Florida for that. And so that creates a boundary between us and New Spain, and you see where the red line is. That is what cuts Spain out of Oregon country. So that they're going to say, enough, we don't want Oregon. But they get Texas, they get that section of Texas that is very good farmland. All right, so that gets Spain out of the picture. There's still other people to deal with. Russia gives up much of its claims because really, again, they're mostly interested in Alaska and the further north area of Canada. And I think we're going to have a map about this later on. But Britain puts up a fight. And so John Quincy Adams comes in again trying to save the day. And he agrees to have Britain share it, like joint occupation. You see that's in black. You need to probably know that because it's in black. So both countries are allowed to settle there. That doesn't mean both countries own it. That means both countries are allowed to have settlers there. All right. Now he tries to get them to divide Oregon up. Again, remember, Oregon is not just the state of Oregon at this point. Oregon is a big chunk of land that involves southern Canada as well. And he's like, well, can we just divide it up again along that 49th latitude? But Britain's not going to agree. So they're just going to share the land. Again, we're going to allow everybody to just share it. If you look at the map, you will see that actually that's where we do end up drawing the line, but not just yet. Okay, so one of the people we need to talk about, and I'm sure will be tested every which way to Sunday, is we call these people mountain men. And I'm going to stop after this frame probably. I know this is really short, but I don't want to get too lengthy with this because this PowerPoint goes on quite some time. So a couple short ones is better than a great big giant long one. So the mountain men were some of the first Americans to actually go to Oregon country, and they are fur traders and they're fur trappers, and that's what they're there for. This sounds an awful lot like what was going on even way back in colonial times when we had people trapping furs in the Ohio River Valley, and in fact, it's the same exact pattern of behavior. Oh, yes, that's right. That's why we study history. So they're there with a lot of other international fur traders, and they're in search of expensive beaver fur, because what is happening is, as these people trap the beavers in areas, they get trapped. What they call, it's the same thing as hunted. They get trapped out. They get hunted out. That doesn't mean the beavers, because there's beavers all over North America, even today in 2017. They're everywhere. Um, but back in those days, they would cull the population to the point where it wasn't profitable for them to be in that area trapping anymore, and they would have to move west, and then they would trap that area out, and then they would move west and they'd trap that area out. So finally, now they're pretty far west. All right. So British trading posts have been established in this area early in the 1700s. So we're thinking even like pre-Revolutionary War times. But the United States did not have a trading post until a New York merchant, John Jacob Astor, created one. Now, his name is not hugely important to you. When you study high school history, his name, he starts a very long line of a family name, highly wealthy family line from this. It goes on in New York for a long time, even up into the 1900s. Okay, so his name is going to come back to you again in history. Not necessarily for us again this year, but as you study forward in time, you're likely to come across his name again. I know you probably won't remember it, but just put it in the back of your brain. Maybe some of you will. Okay, so in 1808, Astor creates the American Fur Company, and this becomes the U.S.'s leading fur company and trades through the Pacific Northwest all the way to the East Coast, so they're bringing furs back, and even over to China. And the way they bring these furs back is through a system called rendezvous. And so it's not on this slide, but I want to take a second and talk about it. And it may be in later slides, I don't know, but I'm surely want to talk about it for a second now, because what they did, these men from the East would set up places where the mountain men would come partway back. So these guys are out in the far, far west trading, and they come back, say, to St. Louis on the Mississippi River, partway back, or not even that far back, because they don't really want these fur trappers to come all the way back to New York. That doesn't make any sense. And the fur trappers themselves don't want to come back to New York. They really just kind of want to stay out there in the far, far west, just trapping furs and being out there by themselves, because that's the kind of life they like. And so they set up a system where they could meet them halfway, or they would send, their minions to meet them halfway and pay them off. And often it wasn't always in money. It was more often in supplies. So that would just keep them in their lifestyle, living out there in the far, far west, doing the thing they like to do, which was out living like a loner, sort of. And that sort of system went on for several, decades, while this craze for beaver fur, the style, was going on over in Europe. So that thing is called rendezvous. And like I said, I may end up bringing it up again to you, but just in case it doesn't show up, because Mrs. Butts doesn't always remember what's on one PowerPoint to the next from one year to the next, I wanted to bring it up now so that you're aware of it. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and then we'll talk more about the mountain men in the next screencast.